Hey BookTube. So I want to recap what I've been reading lately. I guess you could call this a June reading wrap-up, even though I got another week of June. But it seems to be a habit of mine to recap the month's reading a week before the month is even done. I did that for May, and I think I did that for maybe a month or two previous. But I don't really have a schedule or time when I do reading wrap-ups. I just do a reading wrap-up when I have a space and time to actually record it because they tend to go on uh, for quite a bit. So I'll try to keep this one short, but I have quite a bit to recap. Because last time I did a video, it was recapping what I read in May, but then I did a video about what I want to read in June. And so I want to talk about what I've actually been reading in June and kind of a little bit of what I think about it. So I have been reading Greek plays most of this month, but my theme has been mythology, which I talked about previously, and I've stayed true to that to some extent, not to the extent that I would want to, because the plays have been taking me longer to read than usual, or than I had thought. I thought I could read like a play a day or something like that and get through them fairly quickly. Uh, and that has not been the case. Sometimes the plays have been taking me a bit longer. Sometimes they're longer than I thought. Sometimes I'm digesting them longer than I thought. So just a whole bunch of things have been getting in the way of that. I'm going to start off with the uh, Well, I'm going to start off with the first playwright that I finished. I finished reading Aeschylus. I read this Penguin volume here. It has Prometheus Bound and other plays. This has Prometheus Bound, The Suppliants, Seven Against Thebes, and Persians. And this is translated by Philip Valicott. The introduction here that he writes is actually quite good. It's short, but it's a very good primer for the actual plays. And he translates them in prose. No, that's not totally true. He does a little bit of verse, but it's basically it's not. He structures it kind of like in verse, but it's basically prose. Um, and I thought this was fine. There a lot of them are feel incomplete, which is usual because they're supposed to be part of a trilogy. I think Prometheus Bound was the most interesting one from this volume, the first one here. I think that's because, well, I'm not entirely sure why. I think it's I found it well, the subject matter is a lot different than tragic plays. It's the tragic story of Prometheus, who's a god, who's a titan, and he's being chained for his crime of helping humanity. And most plays don't center around gods. Gods do appear in and out sometimes, or depending on the playwright, they don't appear at all, but they're always behind the scenes. But then in Prometheus Bound, it's mostly about gods, and only the only human who really appears is Io. Is that how you say her name? Just Io, and she comes to him in suffering because Zeus has been pursuing her, and Zeus's wife Hera is creating a lot of suffering for her out of jealousy. So, but Prometheus foretells her uh, and the fate of her offspring and how it'll be triumphant, and she'll be the descendant of um, a great tribe of Greek people called the Ionians and whatever, and that's where the name comes from. But anyways, yeah, this was good. The other plays were not all that interesting. The Suppliants, uh, that was the story of the Danads, I think is how you say it, of the man who has 50 wives, or 50, not 50 wives, 50 daughters, and then he's got a brother who's got 50 sons, and the 50 sons uh, pursue after the 50 daughters to marry them, but the father doesn't want that, and so he and his 50 daughters go to Argos for as suppliants in order to get away. And the play is basically them trying to convince Argos to take them in, the Greek city of Argos to take them in, and fight against this group of 50 sons and their army from Egypt to force them into marriage. It's a whole part of Greek mythology. There's a whole story there. The play only touches on an aspect of it. If we had the whole trilogy, I'm sure we would get a lot more of an interesting picture of that cycle. It's a fairly interesting aspect of Greek mythology. And then the Seven Against Thebes is of the well-known story of um, Oedipus's of his descendants, Polynices and I forget the other guy's name. I can't really pronounce it that well. No, not it's not Electra. It's Philoctetes or something like that. Uh, but yeah, where the famous story is that they fight over who's going to be the king of Thebes after their father recounts the throne and their uncle takes over. But they both want to be the leader of Thebes, and um, one brother forces the other brother out into exile, and then so Polynices, who's in exile, gathers up a force from Argos and attacks Thebes. And the Seven Against the Thebes is the reference to that the idea that Thebes, their wall has seven entrances, and there's a great um, warrior leading an army at each door. And inside Thebes, there's seven that are assigned to counterattack and to protect the doors. And ironically, the two brothers are in charge of the same entrance at Thebes, and in a strike, they both kill each other uh, as they fight. And then there's a whole aftermath of that. All the tragedians, from my understanding, touch on this story of Oedipus and Thebes and his descendants there. And then the Persians is actually very interesting for historical purposes because it's one of the few tragedies that, or maybe the only tragedy that actually talks about current events or very near current events. Because this play, The Persians, was probably a decade or so after the fight of or the fight that Greece won over the attack of the Persians in the Battle of Salamis, uh, and the Greeks won a triumphant victory also at the Battle of Plataea, and this is basically a Greek um, creating a form of um, like a victory chant or a victory cry through the form of a play, mocking the Persian court as they get news that their battle has won, or that their side has lost against the Greeks, and there's a whole conflict there. Um, so I thought that was quite interesting. The translation, though, I don't think was. It was clear, it was direct, but it wasn't poetic. And I'll say why that's important when I get to the Oresteia or Oresteia by Aeschylus. This is the famous trilogy that survives, and this I much prefer. This was very good. I really like this. This is translated by Alan Shapiro and Peter Burian, and they go for a very different philosophy. So it seems like this was just trying to go to like translate the play and get it across in an accessible style, more literal and less poetic. This goes for a more poetic interpretation, something that can be read out loud, and something that you could kind of get a feel of the drama. Like this one, you could probably read as a group together with friends, each playing a different part. And I thought this was really good. This was a great translation. It started off a little bit slow because I didn't really get the chorus. Sometimes because part of Greek tragedy is that there's this chorus, and the chorus is always kind of I don't always know what their purpose is. I've read through some of the introductions, they talk about the chorus as, I mean, they all have different interpretations of what the chorus is, but usually it's seen as like a representation of the audience or of common people as they react inside the play to the happenings of the play. Um, it seems like though the chorus has a bit more of a function than that, more of a intermediary or commentary on what's going on, because they have a lot of song and dance rituals that were supposed to accompany what they say, but we don't. None of that, of course, survives. So we only have the words, and how we can interpret the words and what might the words have been performed. Um, but other than the chorus in some of them, and the chorus always like at least the chorus in the first one. So this has Agamemnon, this has the libation bearers and Eumenides, and this is the story of Agamemnon coming back from the Trojan War and being murdered by his wife and her lover, and it continues the story of the tragedy of the house of Atreus, when Atreus had a brother, and his brother stole his wife, and so Atreus kicked him out of the city, but then later on invited him back, only to capture his son and serve up his son to his father as a meal. And then his father, and then of course the father like had a curse or something on him, and his descendants, and the descendants of Atreus here, um, uh, who are Agamemnon and Menelaus. And Agamemnon here is tragically killed by his wife, but then his wife's lover happens to be the son of that brother. So it's all connected here in mythology, though that's not really explored in here that much. Uh, Agamemnon was really good. It was very interesting. Then Libation Bearers is more of the story of the Agamemnon's children, of Electra, his daughter, and who else? Orestes, of course, his son. And they meet at the tomb of Agamemnon, and to plot out their revenge. And then Eumenides is after the revenge has been taken place, and it's about the Furies, or the there's a different word for it that they use in here, the Erinys or something, Erinys, Erinys, Erinys. I don't, I think that's how you say it. Um, they're like they're summoned after Orestes kills his mother, and their whole um, purpose is to torture and chase people who kill their blood relatives as a form of divine retribution. And so that's what they do. They chase Orestes here. But Orestes has gods in his favor. He has who's the one god? Apollo. Apollo makes his presence in the play here in Eumenides, and uh, is basically fighting against the Erinys, and or the Furies, however you want to call them. And I thought that was really well done. The chorus here is in that play is the Furies, and they're well done. They're like these old hags that look really ugly, and that they're always they play an active part in the play, much more than any other chorus I've actually read. Um, so I thought that was really interesting. And then also at the very end, there's a court case between centered by Athena, the goddess Athena, where she has a bunch of Athenian citizens play as like a jury in this court case between um, Apollo and Orestes on one side, who killed his mother as an act of justice against the death of his father, and the Furies on the other side, who are saying you can't kill blood relatives. So for them, the fact that Clytemnestra killed Agamemnon is not as big of a deal because they're husband and wife. They're not blood relatives. But the fact that Orestes, the son, killed his mother, that is divine justice that needs to be retributed, and the whole point is to try to convince them otherwise. And of course, they end up are convinced otherwise. But at the very end, Athena offers them to change their course of what they are from these old hags, always bringing uh, plagues onto people, into the Eumenides, who are worshipped as positive goddesses in the Athens area, and it's a whole whole thing about Athens and its political thought and its whole idea of itself. Very much plays itself out in these plays, but I found it fascinating all the same. It was very good, and this really sold me on the tragedians. This I found fairly good. Just you know, kind of it was okay, but this really showed me what not only what the tragedians could do, but what translations could do, and I thought that was really good. And I did read more tragedies, but I read other stuff in between. So I want to. I don't think I talked about this. This is a Introduction to Greek Tragedy by Ruth Skodel, and it's by Cambridge University Press. It looks like it's meant to be read by undergraduates um, in a class on Greek tragedy, and this is supposed to be kind of like a textbook. But I thought this was really good. I didn't read the whole thing. I stopped. I read because the first four chapters are. I did mention in my video on the books I was going to read in June. I was only going to read the first four chapters because those provide an introduction to tragedy in general, while the rest of the book is a study of very particular tragedies. So the first chapter is defining tragedy. The second chapter is just called approaches. Three is origins, festival, and competition, and then four is historical and intellectual background. And that just provides a general overview. That's around 72 pages. And then the next, like 130 pages, are individual chapters, sections on individual plays. And so I just stopped. I did not read those chapters there because I'm hoping to read them after I finish all my Greek tragedies that I own. And I thought this was really good. This could easily have been dry and very deep in the weeds and very scholarly, and it was very scholarly, but it was also surprisingly readable and very interesting. A very interesting take, or very interesting backgrounds, things that I didn't really know. For example, she pushes back on Aristotle's very influential discussion of tragedy in the Poetics. She thinks that has characterized tragedy for so long, and it shouldn't have. It's unfairly so because she doesn't think the tragedies fit what Aristotle thought was the perfect tragedy, um, and also um, she has a very good background about the context of when these plays were or the context of these plays on when they were performed, how they were performed, uh, and maybe the origin of tragedy, how we can know the origin of tragedy, and of course the intellectual background too. The historical and intellectual background I thought was the best chapter, um, especially when she dives into um, like the pre-Socratics and the sophists and whatnot, and how they influenced some of the tragedies and some of their ideas, and I thought that was a really interesting discussion. So I'm very pleased to have read the opening section of this, and I look forward to seeing what she writes for the individual chapters on plays, which I don't actually own them all. I'll read out the plays that she talks about. She talks about the Persians, the Oresteia as one whole chapter, Antigone, Medea, Hippolytus, Oedipus the King, Helen, and Orestes. Helen and Orestes are the two that I don't actually own. Um, those are more obscure plays that she wanted to discuss, and I don't know if I might just end up reading those anyways. And yeah, and that's the book. It's a shorter book, but it is oversized, so But yeah, that was a very good, very surprising read. And then before I also talk about the other tragedy that I've been reading, I wanted to talk about this book here. I picked this one up. This is The Gods of Olympus. I was very skeptical in my video, original video, because I wasn't sure what to think about this. Um, I wasn't sure how a history of the gods of Olympus could be packed into 200 pages. And it turns out my skepticism was well placed because this felt like a trifle to me. It wasn't engaging or interesting in the way that I hoped it would be and it was because of its length. I found the subject interesting, fascinating, but she's very shallow. She only scratches the very tips of the surface of this evolution of the Greek gods, which is what she's talking about, the evolution of the Greek gods from how they were thought of in their own time, um, all the way to the medieval and the Renaissance period. That's what basically her cutoff is, the Renaissance period, and how the gods are transformed all through that time. Because of course you got the transformation of Christianity through this time, and this is pagan gods, pagan worship. So the gods become not objects of religious devotion, but um, like allegories or symbols. Sometimes or most times leading even to Christian themes, and it's a very interesting discussion that could be had. But I think she totally phoned this in. I think because this should be like what 5 times the length, or at least twice the length, because it was so general, so overview that it really felt more like the Oxford Introduction series. Like I could just read the Wikipedia entry of the Gods of Olympus or something and get something similar. Um, so I was quite disappointed about this. The only thing that really stuck out to me, let's see if I can find it here, is she has a um, I guess I should have pulled it up before I made this video, but she she shows part of how the gods were viewed in the Middle Ages, and the Middle Ages was kind of a funny time for the Greek gods of Olympus, and this actually has a lot of pictures in it, which was quite interesting and makes for an interesting concept. But she doesn't do anything with it, of course, in 200 pages um, when you have images. Uh, those images are going to just force out even less text in you. So one of the see, and this here I found it here. This is an image of Zeus portrayed in the Middle Ages, and he looks exactly like a friar monk. It says Jupiter in the guise of a monk on the bell tower of Santa Maria de Fiore in Florence, and this is from the 1330s. And I think that's fascinating, but she doesn't discuss it a whole lot, or at least not as much as she could. Um, so it's like the most general of general introductions that could have done so much more, but didn't, and I found that really disappointing. Um, so then, and that's it for my discussion with this book. If you are interested in the subject, I guess it is worth a read because it is so short. But it's not going to be the in-depth discussion that you might have hoped for. So next, I read Sophocles. I've been reading Sophocles, actually, I should say. And I started off with this volume here on my e-reader. This has three. This has Antigone, the women of Trachis or Trochis or whatever, and then it has Electra. And I read two of the three. I read the women of Trachis and Electra from this volume. I did not read Antigone. And I gotta say, I really like this translator too. I quite like the style, which was similar to this one, where he was translating it. He has a really long translator's preface here too, quite long. Usually, translator prefaces are like 2 to 3 pages, depending on uh, what they're translating, of course, because if there's a whole history of translation, then usually they like to compare how they're different from other translations. He just goes into deep into his own philosophy here, and he has a similar philosophy as this one here, where he wants it to be poetical, but also something that can be read aloud and something that could be performed. And I think he does a really good job. Though I got to say, the Women of Trachis, which is the story of Hercules' death, about how his um, he conquered a kingdom and uh, found a woman there that he loved, or at least maybe he conquered the kingdom because he wasn't there was a woman there that he loved, but he's already a married man, and the story revolves around his wife back at home learning about this, and of course he sends uh, the people that he conquered, which includes like slaves and whatnot, and also the woman that he loved, that he fell in love with, as he sent them home before he arrived home, and so she finds out that um, his wife finds out that he's in love with this woman who's not, and well, of course, she finds her own position compromised because, of course, she's her husband, or she's her wife, or his wife, and um, she has a solution for this. There was a previous time back early on where uh, she had been riding a centaur who's like a half horse, half man, and I guess he started coming onto her, and she screamed, and Hercules shot him with an arrow, with her like riding him like a horse on top. I think over like a water or like crossing a river or something. But then, as the centaur is dying, he tells her, without Hercules knowing, to save some of his blood because if Hercules ever falls in love with another woman, uh, use his blood as like a love portion, and Hercules will fall in love uh, back with his wife. And so she had a bottle of this blood for just this one situation where he would fall in love with another woman. And so she makes or weaves this elaborate coat and kind of spreads all the blood all over it and sends it to Hercules as a gift. And then Hercules puts it on and stands in the sun, and of course it does the opposite, or does something very different. It instead tortures him, it poisons him. It doesn't kill him, but it poisons him. So much so that Hercules asks to be burnt to death on a pyre, Pyre, I think. Like uh, where people burn the bodies um, after one has died. But he is alive, and he can't bear being alive any longer because of the pain that this blood has been giving him, and his wife, in grief at being tricked by this centaur, ends up dying because it's a tragedy. So everyone dies, and Hercules ends his life too, and that's basically the story. It wasn't very well done. I didn't really care for it. I didn't find a whole lot of interest in it. But then reading the next one, Electra, was so good. It was very well done. It's basically the rehashing of the libation bearers here, where it's Electra um, grieving over the death of her father and wishing that her brother Orestes, who is uh, who had been raised outside of the city, will come back and seek revenge. And but the version that Sophocles does is that he includes um, other siblings, which I didn't actually know. She has at least one other sister that is included in this play, and there's like a conversation between the two. Um, it's kind of similar to Antigone in that sense, but I'll get to Antigone later. But there's like this clash between the two sisters, and but Electra plays a lot more of a center stage in Sophocles' version than in Aeschylus's version, and I thought that was very well done. It was a really good play, I thought. And so then I'll mention what I'm currently reading. So then I'm moving on to I should mention, oh, that was not the last play that I read. I also read more Sophocles. So I was going after reading Electra and the Women of Trachis from that Oxford volume. I was going to read Philoctetes from this here volume. This is the Greek Tragedies, Volume 3. I have the first two volumes here in paperback, volumes 1 and volume 2. This is a volume. This is an ebook of volume 3, and this has Sophocles Philoctetes, and it's translated by David Green. I was going to read that volume from here, and that's the story of Philoctetes. It's a story of the Trojan War, where the Greeks needed two people, or needed two more requirements from the gods in order to defeat Troy, and one of them was to get Achilles' son involved into the war, and then the second one was to get the what's this called? The bow of Achilles. No, the bow of Hercules. Sorry, the bow of Hercules. Because when Hercules was on his deathbed, when he was dying, or when he was being before he was about to be burned to death, he gave his friend Philoctetes his bow, and it's like this famous bow that I guess never misses a shot or something. And this is the story of Philoctetes much later in his life. In the story of the Trojan War, he had been bitten by a snake and poisoned, but the poison didn't kill him, and so he was in so much agony that the Greeks couldn't stand having him with them, so they dropped him off at the island Lemnos and left him to survive on his own with his bow, and they went off to the Trojan War. And it turns out that the oracle, like 10 years later, says that in order to defeat Troy, you need to have this bow of Achilles involved in the war. And so the story of Philoctetes here is of Odysseus and the son of Achilles going back to this island and trying to convince Philoctetes to join them in the war. And I tried reading it in this volume by David Green, but I couldn't do it. The translation sucked. It really did, because it was in verse, so I thought this would be more poetic, but it was terrible. So I read it in this volume instead. This is the Greek drama anthology edited by Moses Hadas, but the translation here is done by R.C. Jebb, and it's in prose. The translation here is in prose, but I thought the prose here in this translation was more poetic and more stately than the verse translation here. So I put this one down. Maybe I should even read the section that really did it for me, because it was very early on. Is it? Yeah, it's the speech by Odysseus at the very beginning. The play starts off with a speech by Odysseus because Odysseus is known as the trickster, which is why he's sent back to get Philoctetes, even though he was one of the main people who dropped Philoctetes off. So Philoctetes hates Odysseus and everything about Odysseus. So, yeah, he hates him with a vengeance, and it looks like I just got a notification that my phone is about to die, so I guess I won't read it. But just compare the speech by Odysseus and the two. It was incomparable. So I read it in this volume instead, which was so much better. It was very enjoyable, and it's a very good play too. One of the better plays that I've read until the very end, of course, when you got the Deus Ex Machina that just kind of pops out of nowhere and changes everything. But anyways, I guess that's to be expected in Greek plays to some extent, Greek tragedies. And one of the things I was doing actually was reading a lot of the mythology that's involved in these plays, rereading the sections in here. So I read this in May, all the way through, just reading it like a book. But I've been having this on my bedside and reading this, just reading the little sections that involve these plays, the mythology involved in these plays, all over again, just to strengthen my knowledge of the story, and that has really, really helped. Knowing the stories beforehand when you're reading these plays is so helpful because then you can get all the references to the gods and to the places and everything without having to um, worry so much about notes and everything. Because all these plays that here have notes to them, but they're not usually incorporated into the play. So here, if you see the notes, they just reference the line numbers. So you would have to, but when you actually read the play, they don't actually reference anything to do with notes. So you'd have to switch back and forth to see if there's a note on something that you just read, which is not always going to be the case. And I just decided to just ignore the notes. I don't think I needed the notes, and to understand the plays, and I felt like I knew enough to just go along, and that turns out to be the case. I very much enjoyed these plays without having notes, and the volume of Philoctetes in here didn't have notes at all offered, and I still quite enjoyed it. So, um, yeah. And then what I'm currently reading, I'm currently still reading Sophocles. This is the three Theban plays. I deliberately wanted to save these for last. We only have 7 plays by Sophocles, and I read Women of Trachis, Electra, and Philoctetes first, and because I wanted to save this for last. This has Antigone, Oedipus the King, and Oedipus at Colonus. And I've read 2 out of the 3 here. This morning I just finished Oedipus Rex in this volume. This is translated by Robert Fagles with introduction by Robert Knox. And um, on the weekend on Sunday I just finished Antigone, and I gotta say, everyone always seems to say, and this goes all the way back to Aristotle, of course, but everyone says that Oedipus the King is the best tragedy that exists out of all the tragedies that we have. And I don't think I find that accurate. I read the play, and it deals with fate and despair and all that, and the confusion of this like morally upright king who ends up being uh, caught in this trap completely incidentally, where he killed his father and married his mother and had children with his mother and whatever. It's just a whole lament about fate and the chances and the worship of chance and the gods and whatnot. It really didn't strike home to me nearly as much as Antigone did. Where Antigone, we actually have a strong, interesting character who goes against the will of the state. And I know like this is always rehashed when talked about Antigone, but man, I thought that was just a really good play. And so much so that I actually looked online on YouTube for a staged version, and I found this old version from 1986, a BBC version of Antigone, and I thought that was perfect. It captured everything and more that I could have wanted from a staging of Antigone. So maybe I'll link that down below. It was very good, and I do recommend it. It's just under 2 hours, I believe. Very good. The play itself is very good, and then that, at least in this translation, it's very good. And then, and then of course that BBC version from the 80s was just perfect. Um, and they do change things. Not It's very faithful, but they do change things in order to make it more accommodating to like uh, English sensibilities. But it still, every little change that they made just made it more. Uh, I think made it better in their version. I'm not saying that they improved on the play or whatever. I'm just saying that it fit the version, the vision that they were going for, and I think it worked quite well. But I did finish a novel, and this novel fits into the mythology that I've been wanting to read for June, and it's a novel by C.S. Lewis. This is the Delphi Classics Complete Works of C.S. Lewis. It's not actually his complete works. His essay collection, God in the Docks, is not in here because that essay collection came out after he died, so it's still in copyright. But it's pretty much everything that he wrote, like including all of Narnia, all of his novels and whatnot. A lot of his nonfiction. Um, but I read his his novel Till We Have Faces, which was the last novel I believe he wrote before he died. And I gotta say, I was very impressed with this novel. If you're not familiar, the novel is a retelling of Greek mythology. It's a retelling of the story of Cupid and Psyche. And I'll give a brief overview uh, of the play, or of the story. The story is of Cupid and Psyche. It's of a king who has three daughters, and his youngest daughter is Psyche, and she is incredibly beautiful, so beautiful that people worship her as a god. And um, that means that it makes her hard to marry off because people see her as a god, not as a human, someone. So he has trouble trying to find a marriage for her. He marries his other two daughters off, but not Psyche. And he goes to an oracle of Apollo to try and see what he should do. And all this time behind the scenes, there's a whole stir among the gods because Aphrodite, or Venus, the god of beauty, she is incredibly jealous because she is the god of beauty that should be worshipped, not this human named Psyche. So she goes to her son Cupid to try to make Psyche fall in love with someone very ugly. Instead, Cupid falls in love with Psyche, and wants her for his wife. And So he goes to Apollo to try to create a way in which this can happen. So when the king goes to this oracle of Apollo, the oracle tells him that he should leave Psyche on this mountainside, uh, and just leave her there, basically. And that's what he does, much through much weeping, and she thinks she's going to die, but she thinks it's better this way. But then instead of having the gods angry at her, once everyone is gone and she's all alone, she's swept away to this like basically Edonic garden, um, near majestic palace where there's no one there, but there's voices talking to her about eating and bathing and whatnot. And every night she's visited by this unknown lover who says she can never see his face, and she's in love with this man. But then one day her sisters go to visit the place on the mountain where she had been left, and she's warned that she's not to see them or to have any interaction with them. But she begs to see them instead. She's grudgingly granted her wish, even though he says that this will bring their downfall. Um, and They visit a number of times. She's happy to see her sisters, but her sisters see her palace and are incredibly jealous, and so they convince her to go against her husband and, in the night, bring a lantern to see the face of her husband. And um, At first she refuses, but after a while they convince her that he's probably a monster, and that she probably should see the face of this man that she doesn't know. And so she does it. And in the process, she finds out that he's a beautiful young man, but then her lantern drips a bunch of wax on him, and he vanishes from her sight. And she is thrown off course and thrown away from the palace. And she's thrown into the mercy of Aphrodite slash Venus, um, the god of beauty, who's still angry and mad at her. And so then she has to go through all these ordeals of Venus, who tries to make her do all these impossible tasks. But along the way, she's always helped out by something else, like these ants that help her, or um, this reed that talks to her, or an eagle, or whatever. She does all these different impossible tasks and completes them because she's helped out by the world around her, that speaks to her and talks to her and whatnot. And in the end, um, once Cupid recovers from the wound of the melting wax, he goes to Zeus to appeal to make Psyche an immortal god, and so that he can marry her. And Zeus agrees, and they are married. And then Aphrodite's complaints go away because it means Psyche is carried off to the Mount Olympus, where she is no longer worshipped among humans, and having her son married to another goddess instead of a human is much more appropriate match, and everyone is happy in the end. And C.S. Lewis takes challenge to this concept of this play or of this story and completely makes it his own, and makes it very much a discussion of religion uh, and mystery and beauty and of the proper way to love. I can't really go on much because my phone is about to die, and I don't want it to die mid sentence. So, yeah, it's uh, he sets his story in a pagan kingdom in like the early or like in I don't know, say 400 BC or whatever, um, because they're in this pagan kingdom, uh, and it's from written from the perspective of first person perspective of one of the daughters of the king, and he makes it his own story uh, as how she takes care of Psyche and how she loves Psyche and how um, tells her version of the story that took place because the whole point of this is her writing the story against the gods. Like she heard that summary that I just gave and objects to it and wants to write her own version of the story and how the gods are always in the wrong. And it's very interesting. It's a very well done story. Probably the best thing I've read by C.S. Lewis, and I've read quite a bit from him. And very mature reflection on love and um, loneliness, and it's a very good tale. I do recommend it that if that premise does uh, interest you. I really wish I could go deeper into this, but I really can't at the moment. Maybe I'll do an individual review of this once I've given it more thought, because I only finished this, I think, 2 days ago. So, or actually, that's not true. I finished it yesterday morning, so just yesterday morning. Um, but yeah, that's that's the novel that I read, and I thought it was very good. It's short. It's like maybe 200 pages, but it was very good, very well written, and I very much think it's the best thing that I've read from him. I read the first book in his science fiction trilogy, um, Out of the Silent Planet. I read that last year, and I thought it was pretty good, but this was definitely better than that. And it's very, it almost, it didn't read like C.S. Lewis to some extent. Like, I didn't think C.S. Lewis had it in him to write something that undidactic and yet still driving a point home as that. Um, because there's something happens in part two of the book, which is in the latter half of the novel, um, completely changes the whole perspective of the story, and intentionally so. So I thought that was really good. Um, so yeah, I'm just gonna quickly mention what I'm gonna be reading after after I finish Sophocles here. I'm gonna be reading Euripides. I have about 9 plays by him. This volume includes 4. It's actually the same translator as this volume by Aeschylus. This is Philip Ballacott. Uh, so this is Euripides. This has 4 of his plays, and I have another 5, I think, in different editions. But I'll talk about those when I've finished reading them, and then I'll get back to you. So thank you, BookTube, and tell me what you've been reading and what you've been enjoying. Do you enjoy Greek plays, Greek mythology? And let me know what you think. Thanks, BookTube.